Huddersfield Town have been at sixes and sevens for much of the past 2 seasons. No truer has that been than this second week of April. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Town Social Podcast. I'm Cameron Pope, occupying the hot seat in absence of Greg Mara. And joining me are Ian Kilroy, Gareth Kay, Nick Barlow and debutant Dan Peckett. Now, owing to the international break, it's been a while since we last got together, so there's plenty, unfortunately, to get our teeth into. Gents, we congregate around the mics this morning after the uninspiring goalless draw with relegation rivals Rotherham. But before we pick apart that tepid performance, there's only one place to start, and that's with Huddersfield Town's worst defeat in 34 years, the 7-0 defeat to Norwich City. Nick Barlow, where do we begin to start with what happened in midweek?
Dear, oh dear, oh dear. I'm going to give it the amount of time it deserves, which is about a minute, to talk about this game, because it was one of the... Well, I switched off after 10 minutes. I've got to be honest. I saw the team sheet, and immediately I just thought, oh no. Exactly the same feeling as I got against Bournemouth. We saw Benzo and Ward up front, Dehaney on the right side. And I just looked at the Norwich side, the form that they're in, and I just thought, We've thrown this game, basically. The players came out, first 10 minutes, you're expecting to see commitment, desire, getting stuck in, getting tackles and getting in the faces, making life difficult for Norwich. And we just looked petrified. The players looked absolutely scared to death at Norwich. Nobody got a tackle in. And as soon as the first goal went in, you look at the reaction of the players, heads down, just accepting. Just like they knew it would come in. We accepted the fact they've conceded and just trudged back as if it was absolutely fine. And at that point, I switched off because I thought, with Town, the first 10 minutes you can gauge it, can't you? You know if the team's turned up and they want to give them a game, or if they've just let it go. And to be quite honest, it would have been easier and more humane just for us to have forfeited the game, not played it and lost 3-0 by default, and saved the embarrassment and misery to the fans. So yeah, absolutely terrible. And I know it's going to be difficult. Norwich are a very good side, but we should not be losing 7-0 in any game. And I just think the attitude of the players was all wrong. I think the tactics were wrong. And we just don't seem to have learned anything from that Bournemouth game. It's almost like we saw it on paper and we just thought, we aren't going to win here. We've got absolutely no chance. We'll try and keep as much as possible, but I'm not going to play my best 11. There was no way that was the best 11 available. We're just going to do what we can. We're probably going to lose it, but we'll focus all our attention on Rotherham. And you've got to give 100% every game. You've got to treat every game as a potential 3 points. As good as Norwich are, drop points against Preston, drop points against, is it Blackburn or some of the less teams? It's not impossible to get a result. If you dig deep, organised in defence, set piece, something might fall for you. But right from that first minute, from the first whistle, we just looked terrible. And like I say, I switched it off. I put Queen's Gambit on after 10 minutes and I thought I'll watch that, put my feet up because I knew it was over. It was just really sad, really sad.
Yeah, as bad as we were, I think you have to give Norwich a bit of credit. I thought they were excellent on the night. Although any team that plays goal-scoring music to an empty stadium deserves to be relegated 3 divisions instantly. Carlos has got form for this. He did it at Bournemouth, and it didn't pay off. We drew 0-0 with Cov. Did the same thing against Norwich, and we drew 0-0 with Rotherham. So I'm not really sure what the point was. Other than, in his mind, it was a game he was never going to win, so he was going to be selective. There wasn't one player that came out of the game with any semblance of credit. I thought Sauber-Toms did okay in flashes when he came on, and Scott I ran about a bit. But other than that, we were beaten by a much better team that had the right kind of mental attitude. We went into that game defeated. There wasn't a player on the pitch thought we could get anything from that game. Norwich played Derby yesterday, only beat Derby 1-0. I had a quick look at the stats. Derby had as many shots on target and as many shots as Norwich. Possession was pretty much 50-50. So, as you say, Nick, it isn't impossible to play against these teams, but you've got to be willing to give it a go in the first place. And I don't think we were ever really in the game. I sadly watched till the end. So, although, the Queen's Gambit is any good, I've never seen it. So I think next time I might follow your lead, mate, once we go 1-0 down. But yeah, piss poor night all round. And Goalless looked pretty forlorn at the final whistle. And I think if he was manager of many other clubs, 2 wins in 20 or whatever it is, and a 7-0 hammering away from home against, probably the worst Championship leaders I've seen in a long time, he'd be doing the long walk. But we seem to just roll our eyes and shrug our shoulders and take it as acceptable that a 7-0 hammering is to be expected these days.
Yeah, I thought we were a disgrace, to be honest. I just thought it was embarrassing. I mean, we all knew going into Norwich it was going to be a tough game. We probably weren't expecting to get anything out of it, and I think that was why the point against Brentford was so vital. But at the same time, you expect the players to put a shift in. And I know Goalless has been giving out these sort of excuses of, we've had these injury crisis and all that thing. But if you're a manager of a team, you put the tactics into the game that you know that you're going to try and compete to the best of your ability. And we didn't even compete, simple as. And I think, we're at that point in the season now where, we're looking ahead, trying to think about what's going to happen in the summer and what's going to happen for next season when everyone's back in the stadium. And if this is an advertisement for what's to come, they're going to have to advertise harder than they are now, because this has just been an embarrassment. And I think the Norwich game, okay, Norwich are fantastic. They're going to go back up. But again, any team should be, you play every game as if it's your final. You play every game with the same amount of passion and enthusiasm. And I didn't even see an ounce of it, not even an ounce. And I think that that's something that will probably haunt us now for a long time to come.
Luckily, I wasn't born when we got battered by Man City in 1987, so I don't have to lie about where I was on the day, because I wasn't here. I wasn't here yet. Obviously, since then, this is officially the worst defeat we've had. Now, we've seen a lot of batterings. We had the Barnsley 7-1 and the Scunthorpe 6-2 at home, if you remember. That was absolutely horrific. And now, one thing I will say is Norwich created more chances than I've ever seen a team do against us that they should have scored from. That game should have ended 10-11. And it's ridiculous talking like that, but that's what should have happened in that game. Norwich were 5-0 up at half-time and should have been further ahead. It was amazing. They put an amazing performance in. If you read a lot on the Norwich forum, I like going on opposing teams' forums after we've played them to get their little insight to see how they reckon they played in that game. And they're all saying it's the best performance they've ever seen Norwich put in. All right. No mention of how bad we were and that we're already in Qatar or Dubai ready for a holiday over the summer. But we didn't turn up, did we? It looked, as soon as the third goal, it was pretty clinical up until the third goal. When the third goal came in at 24 minutes, I should have done Queen's Gambit as well, Nick, to be honest. But unfortunately, I watched it all. Maybe we need to set up a little club, though. When we do go 2-3-0 down, we can just sort of whack on our Netflix and chat about that for the rest of the game instead of what's happening about what's going on with town, because it was predictable what's going to happen after there. The only thing I suppose wasn't predictable was how few goals they scored after half-time. Look, it was very Bournemouthy, like you said, Gaz, and the Coventry game after that ended 0-0, and then as we'll move on to the Rotherham game, and a little bit the same thing happened then. So you can argue, did it work, did it not work? It's a bad defeat. Bad defeats happen. We were walloped, but in the grand scheme of things, I don't put it up there, even with another loss that we've had this season, in that the Wickham game we lost at home 3-2 was worse. I don't care about the scoreline or the performance. I think sometimes the mental aspect of the game and the hangover you can have from it isn't necessarily what happens as a scoreline, but what happens in the pattern of the game and how important it is to your season. And losing 7-0 to Norwich isn't ever going to be enjoyable. The defensive effort at the back between Stearman and Keogh was laughable. The amount of straight passes and straight direct runs that split them and got them in through on goal for easy chances was embarrassing. And do you know why that is? Because a 34, 33-year-old bloke's not able to play at the level that Norwich will be at next year, which is Premier League level, because some of those guys are ready for that now. Bad day at the office. I didn't like the team selection, but I don't think that's going to cost us long term. So I'm not going to overreact on the back of one really shit performance.
Jumping in off the back of that, actually, because you made a good point towards the end of it there, Ian. Team selection. We definitely had a weaker team than we would expect in most weeks. And yeah, as a quick aside, even in 2 years in the Premier League, we never shipped 7 goals. Okay, we should have done against Manchester City in the 6-1 defeat, and I wish we had, because I had a £5 bet on 7-1 that year. But otherwise, no, this was a team as well that we went toe-to-toe with at the start of the season. And to see us so humblingly mauled in midweek, that was the most difficult watch we've had of the year so far. But again, it's hard to be angry, I think, after you lost 7-0. When you lose 2 or 3, it can leave you quite bitter and frustrated. But at half time, you just stop caring. So you feel numb to it, really. And to be honest, I think it was just a miracle that he kept it in single figures. I never thought I'd say that about a Huddersfield Town game, unless we were playing Barcelona in some strange UEFA Conference League. But it really, really was an abomination. But going on to that team selection, we mentioned this after the Bournemouth loss down the south coast, and we brought on a lot of youth players and we threw them onto what we thought was quite a toxic environment. And again, we saw the youth coming off the bench. Jayden Brown came on, Romani Edmonds-Green, Scott High, Aaron Rowe and Sober Thomas were the 5 substitutes that we made, while Fraser Campbell and Sonogo stayed on the bench, perhaps a bit too early for Tommy Elphick. What do we think about that? One, about the selection of the team, and I'm not wishing to labour the point here, but I think it's an apt thing that Ian brought up. But also throwing in such inexperience and youth into a side late on in the game where the heads were down from about the 10th minute.
I think it could damage their. Sorry, I was saying I think it could really damage their confidence in the sense that, I mean, I thought Carlos was meant to come in and inject inspiration to these young players, but in the manner of which he's bringing these young players on, it's just going to do the exact opposite. I mean, can you imagine if there was a crowd there? You know, I can't imagine. I mean, those young lads coming out there playing like that, and in an environment, if there were fans, it would have been unimaginable. But I think the fact that Carlos was brought in specifically to inject inspiration and to get these young players playing first team football, you don't dump them into a 7-0 defeat like that. It's just wrong. It's unfair. And I think that those young players deserve better. And you know, Sober Thomas and Scott High, they've shown glimpses of what they're capable of. And quite frankly, I'd have been more happy to see them, you know, coming on to the Rotherham game later. But I think they deserve more of a chance because at least they're trying. At least they show that they care. And, you know, I think Carlos keeps picking players that just don't seem to show any enthusiasm or, you know, Isaac Mbenza feels like he's just gone back to the way he was a couple of years ago.
So we're looking at it the wrong way there, though, right? It's all right saying we need to protect the youth, but the problem is we've got, 6 games to go until the end of the season. What Carlos's entire mindset there is protecting the guys that are going to play until the end of the season. He's brought off Naby San, he's brought out Richard Steedman because they were dog shit on the day. And what happens to our boys that we need to play in the next few games, if we walk off there 10-0 down because they weren't the right players for the attack that Norwich had, we're in a worse situation. Unfortunately, the guys that had to be sent for the slaughter were the young lads, not the old lads, because for the rest of this season, as the entire thing has changed now from like a visionary approach of bringing in youth players on cheap deals, developing themselves, and later we have changed entirely to just surviving this year. It's pragmatism, isn't it? That's what we're after. And to do that, he decided that we've got to protect the old guys instead of the youth. And now I've never seen that before in professional football. I have not, but that's the only rationale I can see behind why he did that against a Norwich late on.
Yeah, I was just saying about the kids as well. I think, you know, Carlos has been brought in because he's a youth coach who can work with these guys, and you know, Dan's saying he needs to, you know, give them some inspiration. My concern is that they're just not good enough. No matter how much inspiration he gives them, if they're not good enough, they're not really going to make the grade. You know, Sober Thomas came on and looked bright in touches, but he came on yesterday and I thought he was really poor. You know, so I think these kids are a million miles away from, and it isn't disrespectful to call them kids, they're a million miles away from being first team ready. It's a real concern that when we get to the summer, and I guess we'll come up to transfers at some point, that there's already a belief in the club by people who are insular that these boys are ready to perform at championship level next year and make a difference. Big worry for me.
Moving on to what we all saw yesterday as well. Now, in a sense, this was the ideal game for the club to come back into and save some face. We knew that a win put us as good as safe in the championship, despite the mauling in midweek. And on the flip side, the key was not to lose. As we all know, that wasn't what happened. Got the 0-0 draw. But in the middle of those two extremes, where do you think a draw leaves us now?
I mean, someone from the outside looking at it, it's a decent point, I guess. It stops Rotherham gaining ground on us. Wednesday, Wycombe lost, so it's another point on those. So from the outside looking in, it's not too bad. Anybody that watched the game, it was awful. We offered so little attacking threat, it was just, at times, it was embarrassing. You've got a team that, for all intents and purposes, seems League One bound, completely dominating us for, I'd argue, probably 80 of the 90 minutes. I mean, I don't want to go on too much about XG because it's boring, but their XG was 1.59, ours was 0.52, and we're supposed to be the home side that if we win that game, we're pretty much safe. But how on earth Rotherham didn't win that game? I've absolutely no idea. They had 2 or 3 gilt-edged chances. That chance at the end from Wales, I mean, how on earth he hasn't just put that across the keeper instead of going to the near post? I've absolutely no idea. Crooks hit the post when it seemed harder to miss. They're unlucky with a free kick, a really good free kick from Wing, I think, that hit the bar. They should have won 2-0 at least. And I mean, I know on the stats it says we had 4 on target. I can't remember having 4 shots on target. I remember 1 from Sonogo. I remember 1 from Keogh, the keeper say. Other than that, I'm struggling to think of any kind of major goal threat that we posed. So it's really worrying, and this for a team that you want a reaction. We're all expecting a reaction from that mauling against Norwich. You're thinking, right, come out against Rotherham and show us what you're about. Show us that you belong in this division. Take the game to them from the start. And they just didn't. Rotherham, they're a team that likes to sit back and play on the counter-attack. And I think the games that they lost, take Wycombe, for example, I think it's surprising that the Rotherham have the majority of the ball and they're quite uncomfortable in that scenario. And Wycombe just basically waited and took the chances. And that's probably what we should have done. We probably should have just sat back, let them have the ball and hit on the counter-attack. Most of our chances seem to come on the counter. And actually, right at the end, if Sorba Thomas plays that ball through from Benza, he's got a really good chance there. I think in the 91st minute and, in true town style, just passed it back to keeper instead. So, yeah, it was really worrying for me. And I mean, this is supposed to be our best 11 after saving some of the players from Norwich, and really we couldn't muster anything. I thought Rotherham played really well. Really well. It's a team that's fighting to stay up, and it showed. And we look like a team that's sat on the beach. It's a dangerous game because, I've said it. I've said it from Barnsley, where I said we're not safe yet, and we're still not. Not playing like that. Look at that Norwich game and us versus Wednesday. It's a 12-goal difference swing in space of 2 days. Now that can galvanise teams. Yeah, I mean Wednesday lost in the end, but that can really go against you, having that attitude of it's all right. We'll limp over the line. What a sad way to end the season after starting the first half of the season playing this great, attractive football, scoring some really good goals, getting all those points to going back to just limping over the line, probably with 47 points. Which is atrocious. And I haven't looked at loads of stats in a while because I know how boring it can be. But I had a look at some stats for this episode just to emphasise the problem that we've got. So I looked at the amount of times that we've won over the past 4 seasons, including this one. And bearing in mind we haven't obviously finished this season, so it's out of 40 games. But our winning ratio over the last 4 seasons is we've won 36 games out of 162. So we've got a winning ratio of about 27%. Now, yeah, a couple of those seasons were in the Premier League, and I know we had that dreadful season, but we've still got to try and compete. Away from home, our winning ratio is 14%. It's absolutely dreadful. And I challenge any fan of any football side to be happy with that kind of winning ratio. It just seems that we've just got out the habit of winning. We just seem to be happy to just sort of grind, just creep over the line, do the bare minimum necessary. I was still in the Championship with that kind of winning rate. I've no idea, but we are. We've got to expect better. As fans, the club have to expect better than this season after season after season. It's just not good enough. And I was really upset with that performance there because I was expecting a reaction and I was expecting a win. And in true town style, it will come to probably the second to last game of the season as to whether we stay up, because it always does, isn't it? We're a team of extremes. We've always got to either be right at the top, going for promotion, or we've got to be scrapping right to the end. We can't just have a nice, boring mid-table finish, can we? Mid-table season, nice and boring. We can't do that. We've got to take it right to the end, and that's why I still think that we're not safe yet, and I still think it's a dangerous game that they're playing, just to be contributing bare minimum in these games.
I think we are safe, Nick, because fortunately everybody else is just as crap as we are. Out of the bottom 10, only Birmingham won yesterday out of the bottom 10. And there's usually one team streaks away at the end, and I think that'll be Birmingham this year. Lee Bowyer weaving his magic. And then there's always one team that seems to be in free fall, and that seems to be Preston. Now, I think fortunately for Preston, the bottom 3 are so bad, they're not going to catch them. And I think we'll stop up almost by default because we're not as bad as the 3 that are going to go down. And I think the 3 that are currently in the bottom 3 will be the 3 that go down. Rotherham were limited, but they were game. That's what I liked about them. I quite like Paul Warne. I think, he knows his limitations. He knows his team's limitations and he uses it accordingly. I thought Lewis Wing was great on the day. I can't believe he's at Rotherham. I can't believe that Middlesbrough let him go. We decided to sign Dwayne Holmes and they picked up Lewis Wing. There is value in the Championship, despite what Phil will tell you. And there's players like Lewis Wing about. The best chances fell to them. How they didn't win the game, I still don't know. Continued our awful habit of giving away soft fouls, soft set pieces. We know what Rotherham are playing for, so why are we giving away easy throw-ins, easy corners? It's outrageous. And as I said, I think the only positive were the other results. What was interesting, I tried to keep my eye on Matt Crooks yesterday. Who I thought was energetic and got about the pitch and should have scored. We're talking about kids being burnt and throwing our youngsters in and burning them. There's an example of a lad who was burnt, thrown to the saw by Mark Robbins, and it took him 3 seasons to get back to a level where he's a top end League One, bottom end Championship player. So, I'm with you now. I think I'm happy with a point. A point is a point at this stage in the season. But having dwelt on it and thought about it after the game, my concern is, I really want Town to stop up. I really want them to do well. But I just have a horrible sinking feeling that 12 months from now, we'll be sat here debating where we're going to find the 3 points we need to not get relegated again.
Yeah, I'm terrified for next season. I think more so this game with Rotherham than Norwich, actually, where with Rotherham, there was a lot of build-up from Carlos and obviously Pacuna and the social media lot, saying this is the game, this is where we're going to turn things around. And ultimately, they all ended up with egg on their face because, it was a draw and it was a point. But for me, it felt more like a defeat, and it felt more like, if this is an indication of where things are going to go, it's not going to go well. I mean, I'm born and raised in Coventry, and I've seen what happened to Coventry City when they just sort of, sat around in the Championship with no ambition for season after season. Eventually they fell apart, and they fell apart in the most ugly way possible. And I think for us, we've got to be very, very careful that we don't end up in the same way because, while I think this season I do think we'll stay up by the skin of our teeth, I do worry about next season more so because, one, we don't know what the summer transfers are going to look like. We don't know what the plans are. We don't know what our ambitions are. And, with Lee Bromby at the helm, I don't really trust him at all. But I also fear that, a lot of other clubs at the moment that are around us, they'll dust themselves off and I think they'll get going again next season. With us, it's where I think next season's going to be our biggest final decision on whether or not Phil and company can actually get something out of this team and get something out of this club that's better than just relegation scrap. Because I don't think fans are going to take much to it much longer, especially after yesterday's game. I think, you can't expect the fans to keep backing the club and the club again just continue to not back themselves, and it's showing more and more each and every week for me.
Well, when it comes to backing the club, I guess there's another man we need to talk about backing, and that's backing the manager. And so Gaz alluded to it earlier on. He's now won 2 in 19 as Carlos Corberán. Where does it go from here now? At what point do we say that this is unsalvageable? Or can we even afford to say that at all? I personally, my take on this is that I imagine we're going to be seeing Carlos Corberán in charge next season. That's probably financially motivated, but also I think because it suits the hierarchy of the club well. It allows them to keep running this sustainability ticket. And I guess that Carlos Corberán, his get out is that he hasn't got the squad that he wants to use, and the squad isn't good enough to play his brand of football. I agree with that. I don't think anyone's disputing that. I personally think on that sort of record, I think the club just needs a complete reshake because I think it's got so toxic now. I don't think we're going to be able to turn it around. And I think Dan's led into this point quite well because, I can't see what gets better next season. We're not going to have a massive influx of cash. We're going to, manage to shift some dead weights, hopefully. But looking at the transfer business we've done so far this season, it's been very hit and miss. We're not aiming high exactly, are we, in terms of where we want to be? We're looking at the next 3 to 5 years before we compete, isn't it, really? And so we've been told. And so I don't see where it goes. But, that starts with, of course, the head coach, Carlos. And I personally imagine he'll be in next season. But I don't know, what's your take on it?
I think he'll be in, but I think the problem is with that is it going to be another Jan Sievert scenario where they'll say they're going to back him, they're going to keep him on and stuff, and then after 2 weeks of the first season back, they'll sack him. I think if they're going to make a decision, they've got to do it as soon as possible. They can't linger. If he does, let's just say, worst case scenario, he gets sacked. This week or next week or whenever. If that happens, I'll be more accepting of it now than I would be 2 weeks into the new season, because at that point then it's just going to be another, everyone knows what's going to happen. It's just going to be another situation like it was with Jan Sievert, and then fans have got to readjust again. And I think that the club can't afford for that to happen. I think that if they're going to make a decision on him, personally, I'll be very sad to see him go because I think he's a manager with great potential. I just don't think it's with us, sadly. I don't want him to go personally because I do think, again, there's potential with him. But there's also, like you said, 2 wins is in this year alone is enough to get anyone sacked. And I think, Carlos shouldn't be, Carlos does need to be accountable for that. I think he does because, again, he is somebody that, he is the head coach at the end of the day.
He's not getting sacked, Dan. I'm jumping in. He's not getting sacked, though, because we've just given him a new contract. No. Remember what happened? Yeah. Remember how this went this way? We had the Cowleys in. They did a good job last year. They turned it around after everyone's head had dropped. They managed to get us through. Probably it's going to end up more comfortable than this season's going to end up by the looks of it against. And I think the bottom 3, the teams that went down last year were probably better than the teams that went down this year, right? That are going to go down this year. But we brought him in because we decided to lower the budget, and lowering the budget wasn't going to sit well with the Cowleys, was it? Right? We can pretend it's about we played ugly football. No, we didn't, because we played pragmatism style again, like we're doing now. Like that's exactly what we're doing now, right? So what we're doing now is what we did last year. And then we justified that to sack the Cowleys. So under that scenario, we'd be sacking Carlos again this summer then, surely, because he's done exactly the same thing than what the Cowleys... But we know that's nonsense. We know that's not exactly what happened. We brought the Cowleys in. We brought Carlos in to be able to get something from a smaller, cheaper squad, right? Everyone agrees on that. I think everyone's come to that conclusion. And a few months in, we're 9 out of 10 in for the year again. We're doing really well, and we're thinking, shit, we're into it. We've done it. We've got somebody cheap who can get a song out of players that might not be up to the quality of teams of our stature in our division, right? We're getting a song out of them, right? Let's lock these guys in and let's go for it because we found them. And then from the moment they've signed that contract, it's gone to shit. And now this isn't news to me or half of us. We spoke about this. We said when he came in, he played a chaos style of football that no one had seen before. They can say it was Leeds ball, Beelzebub. It was a little bit, but there was more chaos than that. There was less structure and more free reign for the centre-backs and full-backs than I've seen Leeds do, right? And it worked. Teams did not know how to beat us until they realised if they sit back and stay really structured, we struggled to break that down and countered against us. When that started happening, we lost a lot of games, including that Wickham game. That was a real big turning point. And after that, we tried this new style to try and just get over the line because we thought we were okay. We thought we had enough of a head start on everyone to get there. And then look what's happening now. I'm really, really worried. And the Rotherham game. So after the Norwich game, I was not happy with the result, of course not. And as we spoke about already today, it was a big walloping and it was embarrassing. The Rotherham game was fucking worse, miles worse, miles worse, because we looked like we didn't have a clue how to play. We defended so narrow, and when you defend narrow like that, we were in both of the half spaces all 11 players were down the centre of the field when we were defending. And now what that does is allows other teams to go down the wing fine and cross it in. And we're betting on ourselves, on Keogh and Sarr, to be able to nod it out and win all the headers, right? How we didn't lose that game on Wednesday is ridiculous because they scored a perfectly fine goal. There was nothing wrong. The best Huddersfield player on that pitch was Matt Crooks, by miles. Absolutely. I thought we were a centre-back. Did Matt Robbins think he was a centre-back too? He was the best player on the field. And they've won that game. We've through nothing more than a miracle, got a point out of that. Now, that's like normally after a game, you blame the referee and say, hey, we should have won. We'd have won if the ref had been fairer. If the ref had been fairer, we'd have lost 2-3-0. It was unbelievable. I've never seen a ref give us as much leniency as he did this week. Yesterday was crazy. And we've got away with one. But the worrying part about it for me, and why I'm worried about Carlos in the future, is they don't look like they have a clue anymore. They don't look like they know how to change a game when it's happening in the game. They don't look like they've got substitutions. They don't look like they have a tactic. Danny Schofield and Corb, they kept panning to them on the video feed, didn't they? And they just kept looking. There wasn't the same animation that we had at the beginning of the year. They look like they're falling into a hole. And the entire mindset yesterday was, let's scrape away with this 0-0, because the only team that's going to cause us trouble between now and the end of the year is Rotherham. They've got 3 games, I think, in like 6. They've got a game Tuesday, Thursday, and Sunday this week. And now, if they didn't have so many games in such a quick period of time, I'd be backing us to get relegated and be willing to commit with Nick for his nudie run, because we're very fortunate here that Rotherham have so many games in such a short period of time, because it's going to be very unlikely they're going to pick up a lot of points in those games. But they were better than us yesterday. They were miles better than us yesterday. But man for man, they're probably not, right? And when that's the case, the only person you can look at is the coach. He was getting a song out of the team before Christmas. He isn't anymore. Yesterday, Rotherham didn't sit back either. That's a real worry I have. We struggle against teams that sit deep. They didn't sit deep. They came at us pretty much, and we couldn't cause the same chaos we could at the beginning of the season. Now, is that because the Beelzebub and Lee-style football always burns out halfway through a season, as he failed year after year after year until he put £58 million in last year, or whatever it is, on the lead salaries to be able to get over that hump and make it to the end of the season? We don't have that budget. So if we don't have that budget and can't have a squad fit to do what Carlos wants, is Carlos then the right man for the job? He deserves more backing. We all thought he'd get more backing. He hasn't had it just yet. COVID, yeah, blah, blah, whatever. But this summer, our budget's going to be restricted further. So the quality of player that he has, theoretically, will be less because we are paying less. And football is a game that is on money. Look at the list come out yesterday from one of the Swiss Ramble, I think, put out a graph where it showed how many teams had made profit over the last 3 years in the Championship. And Town would currently sit about 4th or 5th in there if we stuck to the break-even model we want to stick with. And every team above us have been relegated in those years. Every single one of them. So if that's what we're aiming for, and Carlos is wanting to play this football that wants a lot of fit players that can go deep into a season and perform at their best, compared to what we actually got against Rotherham, where the players are not there anymore. And I don't think it's desire. It's not that they don't want to. I just think mentally they're spent, long training, murder ball, train twice a day, hard all year. Not much of an off-season last year with a change of system, so they had to learn from the Cowley style into Carlos' style. That takes a big toll on a player. And they look spent. Luckily, I think the end of the season will just come quick enough that we stay up. And if we do, Carlos is obviously going to stay. But it just seems a little bit hypocritical compared to what we said for the Cowleys when they went last summer, compared to what we are going to say this summer.
Yeah, I do agree that it's hypocritical. And I also think that, again, it's not just about this season. It's mostly about next season for me. It's the fact that, again, we don't seem to have a clear idea what the plan is. And if there is a plan, then obviously half the squad, as it stands, won't be there next season. So, where we're going to spend all that money is going to be, if whatever money we've got, is going to be a mystery. But I also think that in terms of whether Carlos should stay or go, my question would be really, does he have to go, or does Lee Bromby have to be the one held accountable? Because, again, he's the one bringing in Richard Keogh. He's the one bringing in players that are not fit to play for the club right now, or to fit in the style of play that Carlos wants. And I think I think people like Lee Bromby and Josh Marsh and anyone in the recruitment staff should be held just as accountable as Carlos right now, to be quite honest.
There's no chance of that, Dan. No chance. You know my view on the management team. I think it's an echo chamber. It's Carlos and 3 mates. And you're right, Ian. I think the problem they've got is they've been doing the same thing now that they were doing before Christmas, and I don't think they can understand why it's not working. It was working, and now it's in. I don't really understand. I'm not doing anything different. How can it not be working? So I think that's an issue. I think it is slightly different to the Sievert situation because we will be bringing, I think, a considerable number of cheaper players in during the summer. Mark Devlin said on the interview he had on the HTAFC family page that they were going to, bring players in around Carlos' style. So that's a real worry. They bring in 6, 8, 10 players to play in Carlos' style. We get to October, it's as crap as it is now. They pull the trigger. Where does that leave us? We've got players on 2 and 3 year deals, might not fit with whoever we bring in. I think the fans' opinion on Carlos, I don't think Phil will care. Phil's already demonstrated that the fans' opinion doesn't rank very highly when it comes to his own decision making. Phil makes his own decisions, rightly or wrongly. But I think the club have got to stick or twist, and I think they'll stick. I do, honestly. I think he'll be here come the beginning of next season. How long for? Don't really know. I think he needs to try, though, during the summer, or the club need to try during the summer to give him some help. If he is as good as they keep telling us he is, then the boy needs some help. And I think that would show a signal of intention for me. I can't see Bromby or Marsh going anywhere. They fit within Phil's structure of people he likes. But I think they've got to give Carlos every chance. And signing players isn't enough for a coach in his first year and shown to be struggling.
I like Carlos. You've got to have balance with it, and he's not beyond criticism. I think, an example was the Norwich game where first goal goes in, doesn't change it. Second goal goes in, we'll get to half time at 2-0. Third goal goes in, doesn't change it. Fourth goal goes in, fifth goal goes. There's no reaction. An experienced manager like your Warnocks would be making 4 or 5 changes before half time to fresh it, just to say, I've had enough of this. But it's almost like he's waiting for something to click with the players to suddenly, they'll get it right, they'll understand, they'll change, and it just doesn't. And that's been my main criticism of Carlos, that he just doesn't react enough to situations in games. But having said that, you look at the situation, he's come in one of the probably hardest seasons the Championship's ever seen. He's not really had a pre-season. The players that he's had to work with, we've lost our main attacking threat in Karoma, and I don't think it's any coincidence that when we lost him at Knighton, the results dropped off significantly because with zero cutting edge without Karoma in the side. So there are a lot of mitigated circumstances, and I'd be interested with a full pre-season if we can get the players that are more suited to his style of play, because this obviously isn't his preferred style of play right now. If we can get players that suit that style, I'll be interested to see how he does. And I think, if he was at a team like Watford with their squad depth and some of their players, I think it'd work wonders. But you've got to support him. If you're bringing somebody in, I've said it before, if you're bringing somebody in to play a certain style of football, you have to give him the tools to do that job. We could have Guardiola in and he wouldn't get a tune out of some of these players. Some of these players, they know they're not going to get a contract next season. And Benza, after January, dropped off because he wanted to move, didn't get it. We haven't seen him since. He's hardly done anything. We need to get these... Pritchard, where's he now? Sweeping up somewhere. I haven't seen him for ages. Get him out, free up some wages, get players that actually want to be here, and let's see what he can do. And if it isn't working, yeah, they'd have to look at it. But, my question would be, who's going to come in? Who's going to come in? We've gone from one certain style of play with the Cowleys to a completely different style of play with Carlos, and we're in exactly the same position in the table. So what type of manager do we actually need at Town to get the best? Because we keep saying this every season, we need someone to get the best out of what we've got. But it gets to a point eventually, 3, 4, 5 years down the line, when they're still not doing it, that we have to look at the actual resources available and say something needs to change with the recruitment. And I agree. I think Bromby. I don't know why we persist on this model of recruitment when we get one signing right out of 4. It seems, and I know that nobody gets 100% right. Every club has signings that don't work for whatever reason, but I don't think anybody could deny that the recruitment strategy hasn't worked in the long run. So it gets to the point where they're going to have to look at that. And I think if they get that bit right, I think that Carlos will do a really good job. But I don't think they will change it. And I think sadly, if the players that come in over the summer, it's a huge summer, by the way, with the amount of players leaving, huge summer. But if these players aren't right, he's a dead man walking. And I do feel sorry for him. because I
I think
think
the Championship next year, Nick, as well, is going to be a lot tougher than it is this year. I do, honestly. You look at the teams that are coming up, you've got Hull and Peterborough top two, and you've got Sunderland, Blackpool, Portsmouth and Lincoln in the playoffs. I can see the Cowleys getting Pompey through the playoffs, 100% getting them through the playoffs. So you're probably looking at, Hull, Peterborough, who are always competitive at this level. They always, they make a good fist of it. And I think if Pompey or Sunderland come up, I think the new owners will be chucking big money at it. Suddenly it's much more competitive than it has been. And there could be some big teams coming down from the Prem as well, not just Sheffield United. So, I think it adds even more pressure, Nick, doesn't it? That you have to get it even righter. That's the right. So probably not the right phrase, but you get my point. They've got to be even more on point with these signings, because if we don't hit the ground running, we're going to be up to our necks in it.
Yeah, and there's no hiding place next season as well, especially with the fans back in. The club's got nowhere to hide. They can ignore Twitter for the time being and stuff like that. They can switch their phones off. But once we're in the ground, the fans' voices will be heard in the ground. They'll tell Phil right in the ground what they feel and what they think, because town fans do that, and rightfully so. But I think, next season is going to be the biggest test that Phil's ever going to have as chairman of this club, because it's make or break. I think, I don't want Carlos to go. I wouldn't be overly shocked if it happened, but I don't want him to go because I do see potential in him. And we have seen that potential in the first half of the season. And I think it'd be a shame to throw that potential to waste. So, yeah, I think it's going to be a real interesting time, more so for next season, I think.
So we've agreed, really, that this upcoming transfer window, and we seem to be saying this every time that Huddersfield go into the transfer market, but this one has to be the most important one yet. Speaking of transfers, we had some news, of course, in the interlude between our last episode and this one. Oumar Niasse out for the season with a groin injury, probably going to leave the club without ever kicking a ball for Huddersfield Town. Can't really see any sense in extending his deal. If he's only here till the end of the season and he won't kick a ball, he still won't be match fit. Begs the question, perhaps, Yaya Sanogo. We've got him till the end of the season too. We have actually seen him in a Town shirt. Does he stay? Is he one that we need to look into for next season? And while we're on that as well, mentioning transfers, of course, you might have noticed in the news that Huddersfield Town were subject to a temporary transfer embargo. It was hastily cleared that was really an administrative error, or an administrative thing, given the difference in deadlines between HMRC and the EFL for publishing accounts. And to follow on to that, the accounts came out in the last couple of weeks as well. So I'll go to Gaz on that, because he, out of all of us, is by far the best qualified, you would say, to look at the accounts. But otherwise, really, I think the only thing to say from that is there's nothing really to say on Niasse. Sanogo, does he stay, or do we want to see him moved on as well, and do we go for a completely clean slate?
Well, they kept the transfer embargo and the issues with that very quiet. I noticed that was never mentioned. Oumar Niasse, I think when they were negotiating his wages, Phil said to him, let's split the difference. And he took that quite too literally, I think. The bloke basically broke his arse. So, he'll never kick a ball for us and get 3 months' salary. So, in fairness, he's probably still done more than Alex Pritchard's done in 3 years. So, it's not all doom and gloom, is it? I think Sanogo's an odd one for me. He's a big lad. He's a big unit. He hasn't added very much, really. I think he sort of played half decent in a couple of games. He gives us a focus. That is a positive. Gives us something to play off, which I think is probably what we thought we were getting with Danny Ward. When Danny Ward come, that he'd be the one that would give us that. I think the money's going to be tight. That much is clear. I wasn't aware the club had published the accounts, so that's new to me if they're out. I'll need to go and look at that. I do know that some of Phil's group companies have published some of their accounts, which made very interesting.
Sorry, I should clarify. No, it wasn't it was the club. We're looking at, of course, the pure accounts that have come out, which of course.
Yeah, it was, and that was quite an interesting set of numbers. As always with these businesses, you can read the numbers any way how you want. The best point a bloke on Twitter made to me was that apparently those accounts tell me as much about Phil's personal wealth as the Royal Mails do to my local postie, which I tend to disagree with. I think as though Phil owns most of the shares, but Pure clearly has had a tough year. It's burnt quite a lot of cash. Its profitability has fallen, pretty much like every service business in the UK. So I don't think that's any slight on Phil. I think that's a slight on the economy. but it's clear his attention has been elsewhere, because Mark Devlin mentioned in the Facebook video that he did that Phil's own business was having it under a bit of pressure. So my guess is he's had to spend a bit of time and effort on Pure, thinking that when he bought the club, it was a business he could leave to run and spend more time at Huddersfield Town. So I think there's going to be challenges all round. Ian, I'm sure, has got plenty to say on the Pure accounts and how that links into Pure Sports consultancy. But the club accounts should be due by the end of June. My guess is they won't be released until season ticket sales have closed.
On the Pure accounts, you go on that for days, right? But the thing is, Phil said himself there was a correlation between the success of Pure to the amount of money he'd be investing into town when he first took over, right? And now Pure obviously have been hit by COVID, absolutely fine. Lots of companies have, so that will affect. And to me, it actually made sense why all of a sudden town were then talking about sustainability. Whereas before, when he first came in, it was about investing at the same levels of Dean Hall, which is at 5 to 7 million a year. Something I can't remember exactly what the financial fair play was at the time, because it did change a little bit from 5 million a year to 15 over 3 or 7 to 21 over 3 it was. But that's what the talk was at the beginning, and now it's changed to sustainability. And then you see the Pure accounts are not necessarily what some people might have expected to be. I don't actually know if their growth, what was forecasted, of course, it could have gone anyway, but every company's been affected by COVID. We get that. So it actually made more sense to me having seen that where town are today. And to be honest, I was happier about it having seen that, because it just ticks a few boxes and things start to make sense. But quickly on Sanogo and Nias, they aren't guys that we'll be able to afford for next season. They won't fit into our wage budget. Not a chance. We shat it in January because we missed out on a few signings. It got to February. We're like, right, we've got to sign somebody. We need to have something, because if we don't bring a striker, we're going to go down. Luckily, the Swansea win came out of absolutely nowhere. And then we didn't even have to really play Sanogo and Nice. But to me, they were a bit of a bit like Keogh was. We just chucked a little bit of money in there just to keep us safe, because to stay in the Championship is worth 4 or 5 million. So you might as well spend whatever they're on, 10, 15 grand a week for a few months to give us that option. And just in case one does work and you win one game, 2 games maybe by bringing these guys in. I don't think that's going to play out that way. But if that would have been important and did happen, then it was obviously worth the gamble. It was a small gamble to take, but I don't see them fitting into our wage structure going forward for next season.
I don't know, lads. I find it strange that they already had Campbell, Sanogo, the goal machine that's Danny Ward as well, and yet they still brought Nias in, which kind of makes me think, do you bring somebody like that in for 3 months when you've already got those players available, unless you're wanting to potentially give them a contract for next season? And I kind of wonder, is Campbell's contract up? Could he be brought in as a replacement for Campbell, who's a bit younger? He's still got a bit of pace about him. Do they see potentially him as a replacement? I don't see Sanogo staying. I agree, he hasn't offered that much. He's a big target man, but we need goals. We need someone that's going to chip in with goals. And I mean, Campbell and Sanogo, there's more goals probably if I were playing up front on my own, I'd probably score the same amount of goals. So I don't know. Nias is probably the one potentially I could see him giving a contract to. He's unfortunate because he seems like a nice lad that wanted to give his all, and it's obviously just a bad injury at the bad time, and it is a shame. But it's quite clear that a lot of these signings are going to be on the cheap. We do need a bit of experience there. We're signing. We've got Campbell, we've got Sanogo, we've got Nias, all of 30 odd. It kind of goes against this policy of bringing in youth. You only really need one player with that kind of experience to help bring the others on. So I think we only really need potentially one of those moving forward, and then maybe bring in a younger striker. But I know there's a talk of this guy at Fleetwood, is it, that come in? But then if he's got to choose between us, Derby, and another club, then we've got no chance. So I think Nias, I wouldn't be surprised actually if we didn't offer him a contract, maybe as a replacement for Campbell, but that's just me. That's just me guessing.
Yeah, well, exactly. Right. Sorry, Dan. So we're not exactly an attractive prospect right at the moment anyway, and that is right enough and true. We're looking ahead to the next games coming up. So Bournemouth on a Tuesday afternoon. Now that's the important one. We saw how well that went at Dean Court. And then following that, we got Forest, which was initially scheduled in for Saturday afternoon. That may well change now because of the funeral of Prince Philip. But looking just to the cherries in midweek, and some of you might be listening to this after this game, but if you're coming into it and listening to it before Tuesday afternoon, I know what I think in my head. And it's not pretty, but I want to go around you guys and see, first of all, predictions for the Bournemouth game, and then a straight-up yes or no answer. Do Huddersfield Town stay in the Championship this season, yes or no? So I will start with whoever wants to go first. I'm looking to the left of my screen. I'm going to go to Gaz.
I think they will scrape it. As I say, I said earlier, I think the rest of the bottom 10 are so bad. I think we'll stop up by default. I think we'll probably know a lot. We'll go a long way to knowing for sure, probably by the end of this week when Rotherham have played their 3 games. Because of course they play Coventry and is it Derby? Coventry and Derby, I think, in 2 of their 3 matches. So we'll stop up. Sure of that.
Dan, want to go next?
I don't expect anything from Bournemouth. I'm kind of terrified of that now after Norwich. It's giving me flashbacks already. But I also think in terms of will we stay up, I like to think, we'll stay up because I genuinely think we do just need a couple more points on the board and I think we'll be fine. I think, the bottom 3, they're scraping away and they are fighting for it and it will be a challenge. But I genuinely believe that if 1 or 2 more points, and I think we could be okay.
I'll go to Nick next.
2-1 Bournemouth, and I'm already starting to work out in preparation for my run. I think it's going to be very close though, and by very close I mean a couple of points, couple of points in it. I would not be surprised if it went to the last game of the season. In all honesty, because I just don't see us winning a game between now and the end of the season. And I think as bad as the other teams below us are, I think they will pick up the odd win because some of them are playing each other. So it will be close. But yes, just.
So much is dependent on Rotherham, isn't it? And then finally, Ian.
That's what we're looking at now, boys. We're not looking about finishing mid-table. We're deciding if we're going to finish 21st or 22nd. Because if you look at the table beneath us, you've got Derby and Coventry at the moment. Greg absolutely fucked us last week. Well, sorry, 3 weeks ago when we last recorded, because he spoke about how our goal difference was a big positive and an extra point, and then Norwich have absolutely pumped us, and now our goal difference is as bad as anyone's. So now that point's been taken away. We're looking at, are we going to finish 21st or 22nd to me? So rather than talking about how Town are going to do against Bournemouth, because I really don't see us winning another game anytime soon, I'm just more bothered about how Rotherham are going to go. Do we have faith in Rotherham winning enough games to catch us up? That's where we're at now. And to say we were a Premier League club 2 years ago, and we are now looking at can mighty Rotherham, catches with a few games in hand that they've got, says everything about where we are as a club at the moment. And all this talk about where we're going to be in 3 to 5 years from the club that we get all the time now. It's like the 3 transfer window over and over again, isn't it? How will we do against Bournemouth? Bournemouth will absolutely stuff us. They'll stuff us by 3 or 4, I reckon. We don't have it in us anymore to bring the chaos and stuff teams like Swansea 4-1. That seems to have gone because we've gone deeper and deeper. And now Steve Chicken said something last week that was really, really good. And there's not much you've not really heard from journos. And I'll be fair to him, he put a point across really, really well. Sometimes when you go with a more defensive style to stop teams scoring, it stops you being able to score, and that invites teams on more and more and more. And that's what we're doing. We made Rotherham look like they were dominating like Man City do some games. And if we're letting Rotherham do that, Bournemouth are going to eat us up for dinner, aren't they? I can't see a win. I can't see a point.
Well, like we say, it's going to be very much clearer next time you listen to a Town Social episode. Rotherham will probably have played 3 games by that time. Of course, they play it Tuesday, Thursday and Sunday. As for Huddersfield tonight, I think we get beat 2-0 against Rotherham at home on Tuesday, and then goodness knows what happens from then in. But yeah, with Bournemouth, Forest, Barnsley, Blackburn, Coventry, Reading still to play, I don't see us winning any of those games. However, I do see us scraping up. I just don't think that Rotherham are going to be able to cope with the intensity of playing 9 games in such a short space of time. But it's been a story of cricket scores and goalless draws in this week in the world of Huddersfield Town. Thank you very much to Ian Kilroy, Dan Peckett, Gareth Kay and Nick Barlow. I've been Cameron Pope. Do join us again next time.